I have been searching.
Welcome to Following the Fire. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the wilderness. Just like Israel followed the pillar of fire and smoke, we want to take a new look at our beliefs and just follow him.
And like Israel, we get it wrong a lot, we get lost a lot, but we're doing our best to go where God leads us. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Steve.
Don't you know it's all I have?
Probably none of you need to really hear this episode, since I'm guessing you've never had an argument. But in case you think you might find yourself in that situation someday, keep listening. Nathan, a self-appointed expert on arguing, gives us the ABCs of arguments: how to approach them, how to diffuse them, and how to know when to stop pushing and let go. We also talk about true Scotsmen, belief versus faith, and how losing on purpose is Christ-like.
But you only wanted love. And I had been screaming.
Hey, Steve.
Yes, Nathan.
I have a question for you. Have you ever been in an argument?
Never.
Me neither.
You mean today
well,
or this
glad
afternoon?
we got that over with.
I've been in my share of arguments, probably more than I should be or should have been.
If you think to like work or life or whatever, do you feel like you're in any arguments right now?
Oh yes, for sure. In work and life.
All right, so yeah, in life. So I am coming to you. I'm just going to self-declare myself as an expert. I have siblings, parents. I was on the debate team in high school.
Were you?
I was on the debate team, yeah.
Like the legit, like you went to tournaments and stuff?
We got on a bus and argued with people for like credit hours and stuff.
Wow.
I may have even lettered in debate. I didn't get my letter jacket, though.
Oh, really?
I didn't want to get beat up for having just debate.
I lettered in band and choir and orchestra. So I'm like,
yeah.
And I got the letter jacket, and I'm a super nerd. Still got it actually in my closet.
There you go. Yeah, we are both the kind of letter jacket that you stuff into a locker.
But I never did the debate.
Yeah, that's maybe as nerdy as you could have gotten in my high school. I don't know, maybe without being in like a Dungeons and Dragons club or something. But in college, I was part of the honors program and started in political science. Plenty of arguing there. I have coworkers. I am married, and I am engaged in politics in my life.
Oh, you are an expert.
So I am an expert in arguments. I'm going to claim here that I have never won an argument in my life.
What?
I don't think I have ever won an argument.
Oh, come on.
But I'll kind of push that a little bit. So if you think back, not have you ever convinced someone of something, but if you have been in an argument with someone else where you both disagree with each other on a topic enough to kind of come at each other and argue, have you ever in an argument gotten the other person to concede your side and say that you're right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'd like to think I did, but
can you think of an example?
No, I can't think of an example. I mean, that's
I have
the
plenty
goal.
of arguments that I feel like I was right at the end.
Right, I feel like I won.
Yeah, like showed them.
Like maybe I scored more points, and so therefore I won.
Yeah.
But maybe if winning is defined as change the other person's mind.
Mm-hmm.
Arguments, probably not, actually, now you say it. I mean, I've had discussions and like conversations where maybe I changed someone's mind. That's not an argument.
Right. So in our combined, let's just make up a number, 70 years of arguing.
Okay.
Experience. I like when companies do that. 100 combined years of experience. Do you have 100 inexperienced people? We've possibly never won an argument.
Yeah.
And you kind of already hinted at what can happen though is, like when the temperature isn't turned up, when you're just having a discussion, it's kind of a different story. But an argument, I think there's an argument by definition, is when both people care about what they're talking about. I don't really think you can have a one-sided argument. That's something else. That's a lecture.
Yeah.
Both people kind of have to care about their sides and be pretty convinced enough to engage with each other. And the natural inclination in an argument is for both people to increase the pressure on each other. So the other person's not seeing your side.
Yeah.
So we use words for argument like a heated argument. That's where both people their emotions are coming out. Or tension. We talk about tension, pressure. Almost like we're imagining this, either this internal feeling or like a physical thing that's just growing. The more the argument goes and we don't make ground, we don't move the other person, like we're pushing. It's kind of like a pushing match, a tug of war. Mm-hmm. And the more that you get into it, your natural inclination is that you have to increase the intensity. And we'll say things like, time to bring out the big guns, or turn up the heat, or keep on the pressure. And we'll even, if there was a montage for some kid preparing for an argument, he'd maybe go to the library and check out a book. You'd see him come with his backpack and slam it on the counter, and he'd be reading it. Then you'd see him with like 3 books now at the library. He'd slam them on the counter. And then the next scene, he'd have 10 books, and he'd put them on the counter and, grin at the librarian who like rolls her eyes at humanity. Because we're stocking up information and facts so that we can just like decimate the other side.
Oh yeah, I can see it. And it's like a John Hughes film in my head.
Exactly, yeah. I was thinking of Rocky, only... Oh,
that'll work, yeah.
I changed the athleticism into dorkiness. So arguing is where we're trying to force our information into someone else or convince them of something.
Well, and to kind of combine a couple of your analogies, it's like pushing a rope, as they say.
I love that. Know? That's one of my...
It's like you can push it harder and harder, but it's not a whole lot's going on there, right?
Yeah, and if we both, we're probably filtering some of our memories, but if we look back and say when the tension was high and we were in an argument, we never ever made ground, but the next argument I'm in, I'm going to just push that rope harder.
Yeah.
It's so hard to, in an argument, realize I am not getting anywhere.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of song lyrics because it's like the poetry of our generation. Mm-hmm. You started talking about this immediately. The lyrics to Belief by John Mayer popped in my head. The very first stanza says, "Is there anyone who ever remembers changing their mind from the paint on a sign? Is there anyone who really recalls ever breaking rank at all for something someone yelled real loud one time?"
Ah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
So, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is because I'm completely guilty of it. The reason I was in debate is I wanted to be better at winning these arguments in real life.
Yeah.
I was bad at debate, it turns out, in general. So even when there's a coach, I don't remember even winning a debate. I probably won some debates, but I wasn't good at it. And I feel like there are a lot of arguments happening publicly right now.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, social media.
I hope this isn't just what it's like to be an adult, because I feel like I just became an adult in 2020. But we're talking about, there are all these words that just are going to make people squirm. Defund the police, social justice, Black Lives Matters, vaccines, tolerance, acceptance, theology, religion, Afghanistan, whatever's happening right now, or there are Donald Trump. There are camps that are established where we kind of know the people, where we're going to run into them, what they're going to think on a smattering of topics. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like the arguments, I have been in more arguments recently than I remember being in civilian life. I have witnessed more arguments recently than I can remember. So I've come up with some self-help tips for myself, advice for people who find themselves in arguments.
Good, because, arguments are what makes the world go round these days. I mean,
It is.
We wouldn't have any media to watch. We wouldn't have any social media to engage in.
Right. And it's, I can't remember where I read this, but you can get a dopamine hit, meaning your brain feels happy when you see something controversial or when you get into a heated argument.
Yeah.
Maybe like the same thing that happens when you eat spicy food. There's pain, but there's also a drug in your brain associated with that pain.
Yep.
And it will draw you to it. And I've actually felt this because I was so fired up during the political U.S. election season. So it gave me a sense of purpose. I had all of these real and imaginary enemies to defeat and to convince and to argue with. And then when that was gone, the election's over, and then I had a vacuum. I was missing that thing that gave me that spicy feeling.
Yeah.
And now I was like, what's my purpose here now?
Almost addicted to it, right?
Yeah, it really can be addicting,
Yeah.
and it is addicting, and it sells advertisements, which is why Fox News, or really any cable news station, they're going to try to give you some flavor of controversy. They'll bring someone on that's controversial to their audience, or they will make outlandish claims. They're kind of feeding that addiction that we already have a little bit of an inclination toward. So it's good to know that. It's good to know that getting into arguments kind of gives us a fake sense of purpose, or feeling like we have an enemy to, I don't know, convince or defend something against. But also just, I think step one is to realize when I am in an argument. This is an argument. And if Steve and Nathan couldn't win an argument, then I surely can't. Just kidding. But that my inclination is going to be to turn up the pressure, or to give the missing fact, or to whatever, to ratchet up the heat. But that never works, because it never works for you when someone does that to you and you disagree with them. So there's a Christ-likeness in that the only way to win is to concede. The only way to live is to die, right? The only way to convince someone of something is to understand.
Yeah, but I don't want to lose.
That's the thing. That's the scary thing, is that it's a pressure match. It's the analogy that we use inside of our heads for an argument is a tug of war, or that we're pushing each other. And so the idea that giving an inch means that they're gonna push you over. You're fighting for something that's righteous and just and important. And so it's so difficult to get to a place where you realize this is not going to be fruitful.
Yep.
And to let go. So there's an analogy in one of my favorite books, by Skye Jitani, where he steals an analogy from someone else, and I can't remember who that someone else was, but he talks about faith being the act of a trapeze artist letting go of their rope, knowing that the other catcher is going to catch them at the end of their swing. And so if you think about faith being a letting go, certainty clings tightly. So people of faith can let go and trust that they're going to be okay. But it's actually an insecurity that would make you want to cling more tightly. It's insecurity saying, if I give an inch, then they're going to take everything from me. So I have an ABCs though of arguments. I had to change the words to make it be ABCs, but so the first one I learned from a random Twitter person online, and I have been saying this to myself at work and also in my interactions online, and it's the hardest one, I think. So that is assume positive intent.
Oh, yes. That's hard sometimes.
It's extremely hard. So assume positive intent means it's a humanizing thing. It's remembering that when someone disagrees with you, even on something that's really, really important to you, maybe racism or something that has like lives in the balance, like vaccines, or it could be anything that you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it's the hardest what you do is you picture that the person pushing against you is evil.
Right. Demonize them.
And that they have ulterior motives that they are not being forthcoming about, that they are stupid.
Yep.
So it's so difficult. This is probably the hardest one. It's basically love your enemies, but assume positive intent. Because this has helped me so much at work. Because when somebody does something at work that the first thing I think is, what are they trying to do? Or I guess when I drop my keys, my family knows this. When I lose my keys, I assume that somebody stole them. I assume someone broke into the house and stole them. But most people are good, including people who disagree with you. In fact, most of the people that I'm finding myself in arguments with are strong and sincere believers in Jesus.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I throw out the window if I'm having an argument is, you must not be a real, true, actual, loving believer in Jesus.
Right.
You know,
no true Scotsman fallacy.
Yes. Tell us about the no true Scotsman fallacy.
I think you just described it. It's saying, when you're arguing with somebody or discussing things, saying, well, no true Scotsman would do that, or no real Christian would act that way, and just like blanket statement that doesn't really necessarily apply. But by saying it, you are, in a way, dehumanizing that person, saying, well, you're definitely not a true person or a true Christian or whatever it is because XYZ.
Yeah, and that's the impulse of fundamentalism, is to continuously draw your circles smaller and smaller around the correct people.
Yeah.
And when you find someone who doesn't fit into that, your idea of who you are or who's correct, you just draw them out of the circle.
Yeah.
And you'll continue doing that. Well, that must, the no true Scotsman is, true Christians wouldn't have stormed the Capitol.
Right.
Well, they think they're real Christians. Or true Christians would not read the Bible this way.
Right.
And ultimately, you'll keep drawing your circle smaller and smaller until what you're really doing is saying, true Christians are people who are like me.
Yeah.
And I don't have to engage with someone who disagrees with me, even though all the other signs might be, well, man, they seem like they might be a true Christian.
Yeah. Well,
it's easier to just say, nope, they're not.
Yeah. And
they're evil. By
humanizing them, like you said, with the assuming positive intent. I mean, like, rule number one of propaganda in a war is make the other side seem less human. I mean, America likes to think that we're all special and above it all. But if you look back at some of the Bugs Bunny cartoons in the 40s and like the late 30s, the ones that they don't show anymore,
yeah.
The way that they portray Germans, it's offensive. It's just pure offensive, because they have to train everybody, not just the soldiers who are shooting at people, but train the entire populace that these people are bad. They are not human. They are other. And that's just such an immediate thing we do without even thinking about it. And I mean, that's where we get all kinds of slurs, racial slurs and things like that, is because instead of calling them a human being, I can call them a raghead or something horrible. And then that makes me feel better about shooting him. And then in an argument, you do that kind of thing in your head. And so you
do it in your head, and it makes you feel better about cutting them down online.
Right.
Calling them a name or whatever that, or just discounting them.
Right.
Uncounting them as a person to be reckoned with. And this happens too, like collectively. Doesn't matter what TV channel you're on. Do people have TVs and watch TV anymore?
I think
does that even happen?
My parents do. I think people do.
Good. It's not like I'm using it's like, send the telegram to the... I feel like I'm using examples that are already 10 years dated. And I don't do that, but I don't watch TV really. But if, Fox News or MSNBC Are those still channels? I don't even know.
They are, yeah.
Okay. I have gotten, yeah. So what you'll see is that people give grace to their side. My guy in the office messes up something. I'm going to come up with a bunch of reasons for that. Oh, here's what's happened. He was taken out of context. That's grace.
Yep.
The other guy messes up same amount. I'm going to say that's the true him coming to the surface and is actually planning evil things. And I will take yeah. Or if there's someone, there are people who agree with me who are nuts. They're out of their minds.
Yeah.
So I will take those people and be like, well, they just got right on accident. I will find the best examples of the people who agree with me. But if there is a nutcase who agrees with the other side, then I'm going to bring that out and be like, they're all like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So take the best of myself or the best of my side, the worst of the other side. I assume that my side has positive intent and that the other side, if they say a good thing, they actually want something else. You'll see that in ads where they're like, they actually want to destroy America.
Right.
If there's ever a candidate that says, I want to subvert and destroy America, we probably shouldn't elect them. It depends who else is running. But what we tend to have are candidates who both say, I love this country, I want to make it better.
Yep.
Or I want to return it to greatness, whichever direction we want to go, forwards or backwards. But they will, but what the other side will say is they actually secretly want to destroy it.
Yep.
So again, assume positive intent addresses all of these things, and it helps you to remember that you're talking to a human on the other side, or a group of humans. That's the ABCs. So assume positive intent. The B, I had to make a choice here, but I said big picture. So really what I would have probably said is step back, but the ASBs wouldn't have been as good. So you can't win an argument by escalating. It just makes people angry. You're only winning points for your side or for yourself at that point. Yeah. So the step back is important. And there's two things in the big picture. One is it's so important to view the difference that you have with this person or this group in proportion to the totality. So what I mean by that is if I'm in a Church of Christ and I am talking about instruments, and I disagree with someone about whether it's proper or not to use instruments in worship, that can feel like, man, we just cannot see eye to eye. The chasm between us is vast and wide and deep.
Deep and wide.
It's deep, thank you. There's a chasm between us, deep and wide. Like
deep and wide.
But if my coworker who's from India was listening to that conversation, she would say, I can't even tell the difference between you two.
Yeah.
I don't see it. Same picture. That's the meme. Yeah. It's the same picture.
It's the same picture.
They're the same picture.
To view something in proportion, and I remember I went to school for political science and then didn't finish it for political science, but one of the first things I learned was just the 3 ways you can compare things.
Okay.
And we were talking about countries, but it works with everything, and it's so good to know this. So you can take 2 things that are completely different in every way but have one similarity, and you can juxtapose those. Afghanistan is not at all like the U.S., but they both have the same dry mountainous terrain as Wyoming. Okay, what is the same about these 2 very different things? That was a really bad example. You can take 2 things that are very, very similar but have one difference, and you can look at that okay, that can help you to focus on explaining why did these 2 things happen, or how does this change?
So either by focusing on the similarities or the differences?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could say the U.S. and China both have capitalistic driven market economies, But there's a big difference, which is China is very authoritarianism and the US is more open marketed.
Okay.
And then you can use that as a lens to look at something. But so when we're talking about arguments, often I think that we find that we're more like the two countries that have a lot of similarities but one difference. And what we're going to talk about, or where we're going to find the space to argue, is in our differences. That's where we're going to have tension.
Right.
There's no need to talk about our similarities. It's kind of like the definition of politics I gave a few episodes ago, where things are political if a minority disagrees with the majority. If everybody agrees on something, it's not a political issue. It's only a political issue if there's an argument, which means there's certain contexts where saying something is political where it wouldn't be otherwise.
Okay, yeah.
And that's because for example, talking about instrumental worship, this is maybe a stretch of the word political, but in a Church of Christ is a political topic. But if you went to the Baptist church saying like, I think that a piano should be involved in worship, would not be a controversial statement.
Yeah, people would be like, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Moving on to the nutcase in the back who said that. So anyways, in seeing the big picture helps. Again, it's a humanizing experience, but it matters to find common ground and connection. And I think it's often possible, even in an argument, to find that.
So focus on the big picture.
Focus on the big picture, at least to yourself.
Okay.
Like if I'm arguing with you on something, it helps me to realize, like, what am I willing to put on the line to convince you of this thing? Because if we have history together and we have common ground, then the answer is like, maybe I'm actually okay not even resolving this conflict. Maybe I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Or how can I use what we have in common to establish some anchors so that this turns into a discussion instead of an argument? And there's also the big picture of time, which is that you can look back on yourself and see the times when you have changed. And so especially if you're having an argument about something where you have recently changed, that's where I tend to argue about people the most. Is this has happened at work. I've done things the same way the whole time I've worked here. I discover something and I'm like, oh man. So now I go and try to convince everyone else, like, hey, you've got to see this. This is life changing. It's good to know that I'm operating though with, like, I'm somebody who has changed on this thing. And so that can be a humanizing and self-humbling thing as I approach a topic.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, so C. So we did A is assume positive intent, B is big picture, C is curiosity.
Okay. That's important.
And I learned this from Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
I strongly recommend that you watch that show. Nobody is paying me to say this, but Apple has a 7-day free trial. Apple TV.
Yeah, I think so.
So I don't know. Don't tell me anything. There's a second season of Ted Lasso. I'm waiting for them all to be released. I'm going to use my 7-day free trial, binge them in 7 days, and then I'm going to watch the first season again because it was really good. There's lots of swearing, but that's not why I liked it. Anyways, curiosity. So if you know that you don't win arguments, then you might as well enjoy the ride. And what I've found is, and I actually have experimented, and if you think that I'm talking about you, I'm not. It's somebody else. If you're listening to this and you think I've been doing experiments on you, it's not you. But a few people that I know there's this strong tension with, I engaged not out of a sense to convey information like I think they're dumb, send my logos to their brain, and also not to convince them of anything, but with a genuine and sincere curiosity. And what I was looking for was, do they have the curiosity back? So I launched in, happened to be one of those big ticket items that people disagree about. And I said, I noticed you posted this thing. Tell me about it. I pushed too. I started out pushing a little bit, like you do in an argument.
Okay.
Yeah, I put a little bit of pressure on, but tell me about this. And they told me about it, and they gave me information about what it's like to be on their, how they think, and then I was hoping that they would say, "No, you tell me." And I'm curious about you, right? And that didn't happen. So I asked a couple more questions. I learned some stuff, and they didn't ask questions back. And so I was like, great. I learned some things. I humanized you in my brain by just being curious about that.
Well, if you start, or if you include a lot of curiosity in your conversation / argument, it really diffuses the argument aspect of it.
I really do think it does. Because it's if arguing is you both pushing, but then you transfer to pulling, and you're like drawing more, like, oh, tell me more about that. It relaxes the conversation, I think.
Yeah, I honestly I kind of learned this from my therapist recently. Like, whenever I'm saying, like, oh, explain problem, and she's like, well, I'm curious about this aspect of that. And she doesn't say, I told Christy that, I said, every time she says she's curious, I hear her saying to me, "You're crazy." But that's not what she's saying. And Christy, corrected me. She's like, she's actually curious about what's going on in your brain. And right. Chrissy told me that she's like, I'm going to try to be more curious when I'm having conversations with people. Because, like you said, you might learn something, and it opens things up as opposed to starting with closed fists. Definitely.
And it still goes back to that, it's an act of letting go. Faith is letting go. So I feel like you have to be pretty confident to approach something with curiosity.
Yeah.
It's like wading into the ocean without a rope or something, or without a boat. You don't want to get... But what I have experienced is that it's completely safe. And I want to say it's in Ted Lasso, where he talks about the connection between curiosity and humility. People who think they have it all figured out are not curious people.
So true.
Because you have the answers.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have wonder or curiosity about something because you're just waiting for them to download your correctness that you have stored up in your brain. Curiosity takes it's an act of humility, I think.
It's the opposite of the stereotypical, I'm not listening to you, I'm reforming my response, which is a huge problem when in any conversation. I'm kind of hearing the word, like I'm searching for keywords that you're saying as you're talking, but I'm really trying to figure out how to tell you you're wrong, regardless of what you're saying. And it does take a lot of openness to let that, to admit that you might, and humility, to admit that you might learn something, regardless of what it is.
And I think I do think that the Christ model I don't know if Jesus won any arguments. I've been doing a thing recently where I've been reading through Jesus's interactions with people and trying to figure out who were those people, what was the situation, and like what was the outcome.
Yeah.
And I haven't made it all the way through, so I can't make bold assertions from that. But a lot of times people were amazed at what Jesus said. Often the people who were angry about and didn't like him before left similarly angry and not liking him later.
Well, the people who were amazed by what he said often weren't the people who disagreed with him to begin with. They were curious.
Yeah, and they weren't even necessarily convinced. They were just like, "Wow, take a load of this guy."
And I think that the people he convinced were the people who were curious, who, like, what does this guy have to say? Like the crowds.
And I would even go further to say that the people that he showed curiosity to, so he lowered himself and spoke to the whatever Syrophoenician lady, or sinners and tax collectors, or he called Matthew, or he called the fishermen, and he demonstrated actually an interest in those people and lowered himself to take part in their lives. And those people did change.
Yeah.
They left their jobs, That's, again, undeveloped theology by Nathan, so that still has room to continue. But I do think that, we are called to be peacemakers. We're, even like, if you are, at the altar, if you're at the temple and you're about to offer a sacrifice and you remember your brother has something against you, be reconciled to your brother, then come offer your gift.
Yeah.
So I think there's this call for us to be, as far as depends on us, the kind of people who can realize when pushing forward is not going to win something. And so now I'm going to start sacrificing. I'm going to let them dominate the discussion because I'm going to be curious. Or they demonize me, I'm going to humanize them. I think a big part, that has maybe been part of our criticism of the generic, stereotypical Church of Christ is not leaving any room for being wrong. I think that it's okay to be willing to be wrong. The stakes shouldn't be so high that you can't ever be wrong about something.
Yeah.
And if you are convinced someone else is wrong and you're going to go address them, I think that you have to start out being willing to admit that you might be wrong, or else it's going to be an argument and not a discussion.
Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder, like as you just kind of hinted at. Growing up, it was so ingrained in my mind and impressed upon me that you got to be right. You got to be correct and right in everything. And so when you're having these discussions / arguments that you're trying to diffuse or etc., is there, I mean, maybe it's just the linear thinker in me, but is there a priority list of, like, a hierarchy of which things I need to give up first? Like,
right.
is like, where does, like, being right come in versus the relationship with the person? Like this, like the age-old joke that is probably offensive now is about how if you just tell your wife you agree with her all the time,
you can either be right or you can be happy.
That's
what people tell you when you get married. All right, you got to decide right now: are you going to be right or are you going to be happy?
Right. Yeah. And
because that's dehumanizing too. By the way.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's saying women can't handle. First of all, actually, I shouldn't speak to this. I don't know how to be married yet, but women can't handle I don't know what the
discussions,
arguments, discussion, pushback,
or they're not worth actually having a discussion with.
Yeah, and so it's better to just concede everything. That's a kind of contempt, in my opinion.
Yeah,
concede everything. Yes, dear, because I don't care enough about you to bring it up.
But there are times when, as you just said, when you realize that you just need to back off and not necessarily. I mean, here I am defaulting into win-loss terminology.
Well, concede is a scary word,
right?
Yeah.
When you back off and you're like, let's just let this go, and you let the person do their thing and just kind of smile and nod. I think there are times when that's necessary because you realize you're not making any headway, and pushing is going to make the relationship worse. So, does relationship always trump being quote unquote right, or are there times when it does or doesn't? Or I mean, is it just like I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with the question, but you see what I'm saying?
The question you're asking is at the crux of the issue because, first of all, you're going to get to an issue where you're like, but not this. I can't. Like, this topic is important enough or they are wrong enough, or they are causing damage enough, or the stakes are high enough.
Yeah.
That it is that that not winning this is not an option.
Right. Must win.
Yeah, must win, must address this. Even maybe the point isn't to win, the point is to be seen as pushing back. And that's that's something we listeners have asked us, when does being right actually matter? Or what issues? Like what are the non-negotiables? And one problem with that is that everyone is always going to draw those lines differently, because that's like, I don't know, if you look at Christian denominations, the whole difference between them is they've prioritized different things.
Yeah.
So they're all going to have a thing that's like, nope, this is priority number one. So we're fine with some other stuff, but this thing, no. But I think part of faith is like, what if we don't have to fight and win those battles ourselves? What if it, thinking about, Martin Luther King, for example. We read Why We Can't Wait, episode 10, and he is fighting for the justice of causes. It is urgent. He has certitude in his position, and he is dealing with people who he doesn't really even have to misjudge their intent. Their intent is for evil. And yet, he still, we're told to be innocent as doves, shrewd as snakes.
Yep.
I don't know what that means. But in this context, I think I do know what it means. Because what he did was, he didn't just launch into an ideological battle knowing that his correctness was enough, that's going to take him through to victory, to the right result. He realized actually that what he needed to do was be strategic and know his enemy and plan out, all right, how can we be practical about convincing a nation of this thing?
Yeah.
So the practical answer to the question is, even on the most important issues, turning up the temperature blindly just because you are right and saying, I will concede no ground. I think that there is a more practically, that's even if it is the most important thing to you, I still don't think it's the way to go through. What you're doing is reinforcing yourself.
Right.
If you're at that point. Are there things worth fighting for? Yeah. And arguing for or standing up for? Yes, definitely. So I'll draw a picture. I think that it's important, if you're doing the ABCs and it's something that's extremely important to you, you're humanizing your audience, and you're looking at the big picture. There's a clear biblical answer to when there is something that is really important and needs to be addressed. Where should my criticism be directed first? And the answer is inward. Where do I have, 007 has license to kill? Where do I have license to, whatever it takes, cut off the limb, whatever it takes? The answer is myself.
Oh, it's the whole log speck thing in the eye, right?
Log speck from the Sermon on the Mount. If your brother has a speck in his eye, you should take out the log out of your own eye first.
Right.
And that I think that's an extremely biblical principle, and it works individually and collectively. The majority of my criticism should be directed inwardly. The majority, when I work for a company and we think about problems, we should be thinking about our problems and solving our problems. And when I'm at a church, if all of our criticism is them, they do this wrong, they are the enemy, they don't have it right, they need to fix themselves, that's all speck pulling, no log pulling. And there's a pretty clear... So, I'm not answering your question about when is it okay for there to be a topic where you don't do that, but I do know where to start, according to Michael Jackson, with the man in the mirror. But then I do think it's proportional. So if I'm in the middle and you start drawing concentric rings, a target shape, well, there are people that I am in intimate relationship with who are Christians who I love.
Yeah.
Not because it's hard, but because it's easy to love. So I have less responsibility for them than I do for me. It's a lower amount, but I think that's where, like, you know, the verse about iron sharpening iron. I think that there's room for that. But if you're a good blacksmith, you don't destroy the sword that you're trying to sharpen. You don't as iron sharpens iron until you've got someone that's bitter and angry and defeated.
Mm-hmm.
You know when, like, it's the metal's too hot to strike, and you know when to temper and when to quench. Or I'm making up blacksmith words.
Those are
now,
good.
But
you're good.
I did it. Okay, so the next step is like my literal brothers and sisters sometimes, or my parents, or my wife, and then you can just envision this. You know, then maybe like kind of my fellow Christians that I know. But once you get to acquaintances on the target circle, what am I really supposed to do with acquaintances who are wrong about stuff?
Yeah.
And there are all kinds of caveats. People are imagining like they are hurting entire races of people in our country, right? Or I'm not trying to be absolutist about this, but the principle I think is true that in proportion to your intimacy with people, starting with yourself is how much you're allowed to criticize, push, argue, pull. And then once you get to this outer ring that I call the imaginary other, the imaginary other is an evil person who thinks evil thoughts and has secret plans and the power to like change societies.
Yeah.
And you'll see a lot, and I do this too. I talk about imaginary others all the time, probably even on this show. But if you spend most of your time criticizing imaginary others as a church or as an individual, I think you've got it backwards.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that it all comes down to love in my mind, because if you know somebody who believes a certain thing or is a certain way or whatever, I mean, if you're a good person, which I really think that most people are good people at heart, then you're going to, like, our brains are wired to automatically find the connections. I think by default, we want to find the similarities, back to your earlier point. It may be, you know, like we may get a dopamine hit off of it, but it's still uncomfortable, at least at the beginning, to just focus on the differences. But when I'm focusing on the similarities, and I have this empathy for the other, whatever that other may be, that triggers love in you, and you are more willing to accept the differences and to turn off the argument sooner than later, you know? Whereas before, like, if that, I think this, you know, not to sound like okay boomer, but it's like the online problem, the social media problem. I don't know these people with no faces online, and so they're super other, and so I can treat them any way I want. When I know the person, or I understand what kind of person they are, whether race or orientation or whatever, then it's harder for me to demonize them because I see myself in them.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's key to why, you know, Facebook is so toxic, because I was listening to the Christianity Today panel discussion recently, and there were Facebook comments going off on the side. And what I'll do, so I'll start in my outer circle where I should never think or talk or criticize about anyone, which is imaginary others. But I have like personas that I've developed of imaginary other.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's that I just love to hate the fake people that I invented.
Yeah. Sometimes maybe based on real people, but
I take my characters. My inspiration is from real life, but then I turn them into a caricature.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I assume everything about them. You know, this is what stereotyping is, and here's what'll happen. I've got a well-developed stormer of the Capitol in my brain.
Right.
And then somebody's grandma writes something on Facebook that I see. I don't know who this person is.
Yeah.
She's a daughter. She's widowed. She has 3 children. She volunteers. I don't know any of that. She writes one sentence. I literally don't know her from Adam. And I'm like, you're the stormer of the Capitol I've been waiting for.
Right.
I've been fantasizing about you. So now I'm going to write my witty response, you know.
Yeah, I know nothing about you, but your avatar is a red hat. So, end of discussion. I know exactly who you are, right?
Yeah. And so it could be like, oops, she forgot the comma. She didn't mean to say it like that. And what I do is like full, North Korea launch all the nukes at once. I was ready for this. That's what happens online because it's deep. People say humanizing and dehumanizing, but it really is. And this even, sadly online happens to people I know. Like I know this person in real life. Online, I'm like, yeah, you're this, I would never, ever, ever say a snide comment to this person's face.
Yeah.
But they don't know where I live. So from the safety of my basement, I will take my side and address their side. It's like 2 imaginary other personas fighting each other, not 2 people who are real people.
Well, that even happens with people that we know in real life, like you were just saying. Like my cousin, who I know does not listen to this podcast.
Good.
Right.
We don't like them anyways.
We don't like them anyway. Yeah. But
I don't know anything about you, but I'm assuming lots of things about you.
I mean, I grew up with this person. I've known her my entire life, literally. And when we're in person, like last time I saw her, I pulled out my guitar. She pulled out her ukulele. We like sang songs together and stuff. And her kids are like singing with us, and it was a great time. And then we get on Facebook, and I post something about who knows what, and immediately it blows up into an argument about abortion, and we're slamming each other, and I finally just had to unfriend her, so I didn't do it anymore. But I mean, it's shocking how I know all this stuff. It's like I see myself doing it, and I still do it. And it's so tempting to see anybody with a different opinion as the other that needs to be just squashed.
Right. And with good reason sometimes, though. That's the hardest
problem,
part for me is, what about, it's easy in theory. I've been using fake examples this whole time. But what about the thing that I actually care about, that maybe impacted me personally, that is damaging the church, that is damaging Christ, that is damaging people? I don't necessarily have a cookie cutter answer for that, but that's what makes it hard, is the justification.
Yeah.
But I am right. And I'm right in a way that is important to convince other people. I have used this and been accused of spiritual bypassing, which is where you kind of use a hallmark churchy phrase to dismiss a difficult topic. Like, why couldn't you be more joyful, Steve, about your dual diagnoses?
Oh yeah, right.
That's spiritual bypassing. But so these phrases can certainly be used and abused that way. But we truly are, one of the hardest things about being a Christian is we are called to love our neighbor, and then we are also called to love our enemy.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard enough to love your neighbor.
Yeah.
Or your brother. Like, if you don't love your brother that you can see, how can you love God that you can't see?
Yeah.
It's like, well, because God doesn't get on my side of the minivan on road trips. And God isn't stubborn. And God doesn't forget my birthday. What do you mean? How can, it's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy to love something theoretical and far away. It's hard to love something real and breathing and smelling and present.
Yeah.
But the call to love your neighbor and to love your enemy, that doesn't make any of these things go away, and it is still, these are weighty things to think about, but they are Jesus' example of how to defeat Rome, or, the whatever evil thing you can imagine going on. The Christ answer to that question is death and self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
It is not ramping up and meeting, war with war and power with power. It's meeting power with a bleeding sheep.
Well, and that kind of gets me back to my question of when, and honestly, if you ever prioritize being right above a relationship. And the more I think about it, I think the answer is you don't. Or you probably should try not to. Because, back to love, Jesus died for a relationship.
Correct.
And he could have argued till he was blue in the face. He could have forced them to believe him. All kinds of options he had. But he said, you know what? Forgive them. I know they're wrong, but forgive them, and I'm going to let this happen because my relationship with them is more important than being quote unquote right. And that's hard. Because that means letting,
really hard.
like, kind of like you said, faith is kind of opening up your hands and letting go. There's a great quote from Alan Watts that made me I just thought of. He said, "Belief, as I use the word here, is the insistence that the truth is what one would leaf or wish it to be. The believer will open his mind to the truth on the condition that it fits with his preconceived ideas and wishes. Faith, on the other hand, is an unreserved opening of the mind to the truth, whatever it may turn out to be. Faith has no preconceptions, it is a plunge into the unknown. Belief clings, but faith lets go." And I love that because belief is what we tend to argue about. We tend to argue about our beliefs. And we're sure and we're right and we cling to that. We make those beliefs so important that we squish and we squash other people and hurt them. Whereas if we have faith in God and in our maybe in faith in our relationship, we can open our hands and let that happen, and let happen, let come what may. At least we still have a relationship, right?
Yeah. I think it's a hard thing to accept in reality that maybe we're called truly to put people and relationships above being correct.
Yeah.
But I think my favorite, I feel like I refer to this every episode, but the story of the Good Samaritan, I think it's all about that.
Oh yeah.
What we want the question to be, okay, but seriously though, I'll move my hands. You tell me when it's okay that there's this amount of wrong for me to get out of a relationship. Now? Is it now? Is it now? Are you serious? Okay, I'm going to start over. I'm doing memes.
You must have missed it.
Yeah, you must have missed it. I'm starting over. This is ridiculous. That's what we want. We want, like, how many times is too many times to forgive someone?
Mm-hmm.
That they're just wrong enough, or whatever. And Jesus' answer to that question in the story of the Good Samaritan doesn't actually answer that question. It just puts it. He says, "Okay, imagine that somebody needs help, and the rightest of right person walks by the road.
Yeah,
and they don't help them. Okay, great. Then another person who's right about everything walks by. Okay, great. They didn't help him either. Now the person who has it wrong on every topic.
The wrongest
You've
of wrong.
got Bible and verse. They're the wrongest of wrong, and you can point it's not left up to the imagination. You know all the stuff they're doing wrong. It's in the Bible what they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
And then this person helps his neighbor. And then he says, "Be like that person." So I think Jesus' answer is, I would rather you have concern for people than to get it all correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the one rule he gave us, right? I mean, the one...
It really
this
is.
one
It
command
is.
I give you. And I wish... Somebody commented to me recently how there was a situation that they disagreed with somebody pretty fundamentally on a quote-unquote biblical topic.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I've got to figure out, as regards their relationship, they say, I got to figure out what does love look like in this situation? It's like, well, you're asking, like, your question betrays the answer in your mind anyway.
Yeah.
Like, love doesn't change in my mind. I mean, love is love, and just because you disagree with somebody doesn't mean you love them differently. I don't know.
Yeah, we run into that a lot because here's what the Pharisees did to the Bible. The Pharisees got the Bible and they tried to understand it and draw the lines around it and figure it out so they could tell, am I in it or am I out of it?
Yeah.
Great. So they did that with the Old Testament. Well then, and the Old Commandments, let's say. Well, we're given a new commandment, and the first thing we want to do is be like, yeah, okay. Love God, love others. Can you give me some boundaries for that? Who is my neighbor? How many times is too much love?
Yeah, it's at the same time too easy and too hard.
Yeah, because it's like, wait a minute, you just took the training wheels off and strapped a rocket onto this bike. Give me some those boundaries back. And we know that there's complexity to love, but it's got to follow the made up theory I just came up with a few minutes ago about intimacy. Like, you can know how to love your brother if you know your brother. You put yourself in your brother's shoes, you know who your brother is. But as you go on down towards your acquaintance, well, love is going to be like, the analogies of like how parents show love to children make sense in a complete intimate and complete knowing and complete trusting relationship.
Yeah.
But you don't discipline strangers.
Right.
Like, discipline is not a form of love to a complete stranger. It only can be if you have enough knowledge and wisdom about your child and not someone else's child, I think it's just trying to define, I understand the impulse, I guess. And the trying to figure out what love looks like, the answer is love looks like Jesus. The stands that Jesus took, he did. He took stands. But ultimately, he sacrificed himself for those people he took those stands against.
Yeah.
And his example and his call to Christians is to wash each other's feet and not to I think it's easy to imagine when I think about Malachi at school, my son. If I know that he mistreated some kid, but it was because Malachi was right about something, I would instantly be like, Malachi, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that they were wrong. It matters how you treat people. It's so easy to understand from that perspective. But now that we're adults, we're like, but now I'm right about an adult thing.
So it matters more.
It matters more. And God's like, guys.
It's like the cartoon that the wife is like, come on to bed, honey. He's like, I can't. Somebody's wrong on the internet.
Somebody on the internet is wrong? Yeah, I get that. And I run into people who are wrong on the internet, and I see it as my calling in life.
Yeah.
It's, what is it, Esther or Ruth? Esther. I'm about to misquote Esther. Maybe it is for such a time as this. Right?
I think that's Gandalf you're thinking of.
No, it's Esther and Gandalf. Yeah. But like, maybe it's, I found myself on Reddit at 2 a.m. for such a time as this to correct that person who was wrong about this thing. Maybe that's what God has called me to, right? That's an Esther, right? Am I, you know what I'm talking about, though?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
It's also Gandalf, but, Tolkien was a believer too, so.
I should have gone with the more manly one. Rats.
That's fine.
Yeah, we have faith. I described faith as letting go, but maybe the thing that can really give you stability and give you that foundation is knowing that God is this trapeze artist that's going to catch you and that it's going to be okay, and that God changes people.
Yeah.
And so the Lord's Prayer, where you say, "Our Father in heaven, I want you to be lifted up," you can instantly assume I don't need to be the one that's looks right.
Right.
I don't need to be lifted up. Our Father in heaven, may you be lifted up. May your will be done includes, I hope that you correct all these idiots on the internet.
Right.
It means like, I want you to change hearts and minds. May your will be done through me. But also at the end of the prayer, we acknowledge that it's completely by God's power.
Yeah.
We don't say, may you make your will known to me so that by my power, I might just like brute force it into happening.
And I think we need to remember that we're not responsible for making everybody believe the right stuff. We get so hung up on that, and I used to be me, hardcore.
Yeah,
I felt so responsible, especially doing mission work. I felt so responsible for everyone around me, and that's just not. It's not. We're just not responsible for all that. I mean, God has a lot of part to play.
Yeah, and it should be the majority part. If it's not the majority part, then I might be doing it wrong. And if anything, it should be by my fruit, and not. It should be by my fruit that people are that their hearts change, and my fruit has nothing to do with me. If I am loving God and I have God's Spirit, and then God creates fruit in me, it isn't even by anything that I do, but that has been what has convinced me about things when I meet people who just have the clear fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
And those people aren't yelling and arguing with me, by the way, So if I want to do the same thing and have my fruit turn into more fruit in other people's lives, I have to turn myself way down and lower myself until I'm out of the picture.
Yeah. It's like back to the inimitable John Mayer. Belief is a beautiful armor, but makes for the heaviest sword.
That's good.
Got to remember. I think we need to remember that, even if you don't want to let this person be right that you're arguing with, try to remember, maybe, we say live to die another day. Let the relationship live to die another day. Because if you kill it now, there's no hope for making any influence on this person at all in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But if you can focus on dialing down the right, and dialing down that my belief is the only belief. I'm not a proponent of relativism, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're not saying that I believe everything equally. I think that humility just allows a discussion instead of an argument.
Yeah, it's kind of like parenting. When the kids were younger, I found myself getting frustrated with the fact that they weren't learning fast enough. They weren't maturing quick enough. Like, I told you not to do this, and you did it again.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, "Hun, they're kids. They're growing. They're learning. They're not done cooking yet. And
yeah.
I know that I'm not done cooking yet either. And neither are you, and neither is anybody on this planet. So some patience and some empathy and some love."
That's
that's
really good advice. Yeah. We're works in progress. I'm a work in progress. They're a work in progress.
They may be wrong works in progress. Let's be clear.
They're completely, some art is bad art, Steve.
I could have done that.
Yeah, finished art can be horrible, Just because you're a work in progress doesn't mean you're going anywhere good.
I just throw paint on the wall, call it good.
Yeah. Oh, the whole thing that I was going to talk about, in my notes, I never did. I I was going to talk about terminology battles. Should I save it for later, or should I?
Yeah, I'll save it for later.
Let's save it for later. All right.
This is good, man.
Yeah. We'll see. Better and easier in theory than in practice.
So we're not going to argue anymore, right?
We're done with.
We solved it.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find everyone who is convinced that arguing is the way to go, and I'm gonna go at it until they see my point that it's not.
I think it's going to work.
Yeah, I've got a lot of good points, so I'm going to get on Twitter, find the most argumentative people, and convince them.
Twitter's the best place to convince people of things, for sure.
I've found complete strangers that it goes really well.
Oh man. Well, thanks for is really an interesting topic. Thanks a lot for bringing it up.
Yeah, I'm interested in
ABC.
ABCs. If you were yelling at the podcast at any time, I want to know. I want to know what you were yelling. If you disagreed with that, that's okay. I'm curious about what you thought. See, I'm already practicing. So send us a note. Go to followingthefire.com. There's a contact us. And you can say specifically at Nathan, because he was wrong, I have this to say. That's fine. We want to hear from you.
All right, until next time.
All right.
See you later.
See ya. That was fun.
All these messages I thought you wanted to hear, but it only takes a whisper.
Hey, thanks for listening to Following the Fire. If you'd like to see show notes for this episode, which includes links to everything we mentioned as well as all the scriptures, head on over to followingthefire.com and just click on this episode. There's also contact information on the website. Let us know what you think about the show and if you have any suggestions for future topics. Also, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts if you could. It really helps other folks find the show. And as always, thanks to the fabulous Daniel Wheat for the theme song and the music for the episode. You can find more of his stuff on Apple Music and Spotify. See you later.